I really don't think there are many of us that were surprised that the Arizona Cardinals weren't very good last year. I'm sorry, the vibe I got pretty much all the way through was that the Cardinals were just kind of riding out the string on a bit of a downward decline, and that it was going to be the last year with Bruce Arians as the head coach. It's just the vibe, it was just the feeling, and it bore out to be true. Now, sure, having Carson Palmer go down with injury certainly doesn't help, especially when you lose David Johnson to a season ending wrist injury in week one. That certainly doesn't help at all. But it just never felt like the Cardinals were really going to be serious or any type of real contender or any real type of playoff threat last year. They just didn't. And ultimately, they weren't. And not surprisingly, at the end of the year, Carson Palmer retired. I don't think that was a surprise to anyone, honestly, at this point. And Bruce Arians decided he was going to step aside and leave as head coach of the Arizona Cardinals, which I think ultimately should not have been a surprise to anyone. He had his moment, he had his time, he had some good years there in Arizona, but it was time for him to go. Not that he had done a bad job, because frankly, the past couple of years I thought he did pretty well, all things considered, and I will miss the fucking hats and the personality and the kind of swag and badassery that Bruce Arians would demonstrate from time to time. But the time was up, and it was time to move on. So, not surprisingly, the Arizona Cardinals did move on. They got a new head coach. They let several players go via free agency and different things. Now, obviously, Carson Palmer retired, but Blaine Gabbert, Drew Stanton, gone. Tony Jefferson, gone. John Brown, gone. Honey Badger, gone, which was a bit of a surprise, but maybe not so much. So there were a lot of changes in Arizona. And frankly, a lot of changes needed to be made because this was a team with some talent, with some stars, but a lot of holes in a lot of other places and just didn't have the right mix, the right chemistry in order to be really considered a playoff team. What I found fascinating, though, is that you cut Honey Badger to then give a bunch of guaranteed money this year to Sam Bradford and Giraffe Neck Glennon. That's the type of stuff to me that dumb organizations do. I'm sorry. And wearing a Bear shirt, I fully understand what I'm saying because this is exactly the type of crap that the Bears would do in previous years. Is sit there and let good players go and bring in bad players and pay them a bunch of money. Now, Sam Bradford is not terrible, but he's not very good. The one thing he is expertly skilled at is ripping off teams of a crap ton of money. If we ever need any negotiations in financial matters, we better hope to God we can either get A, Sam Bradford's representation, or B, somebody that acts like Sam Bradford's representation. Because somehow, someway, he was able to rip off the Arizona Cardinals for $15 million guaranteed this year. You can have your feelings about that all you want, Cardinals fans, but give me a freaking break. Dude with brittle, fragile knees who played, 1.5 games this past season, whatever it was, and you gave him $15 million guaranteed. It wasn't a prove me deal for Sam Bradford like a 1 year, $5 million thing like a Teddy Bridgewater got. It was a 1 year, $15 million. The Cardinals proved how much they had a boner for Sam Bradford type of deal. It's whatever. But they brought in Justin Pugh as well. They've got a healthy David Johnson coming back, which is huge. It sucked to see him be out the majority of 2017. It really did, because he's one of the young, bright stars in the league, one of the best all-around three-down backs in the league. And to see him go from northern Iowa to Arizona and then have that wrist injury sucked, because it's like this was a guy poised to become one of the marquee names in the league, and then he's out for almost a whole season. It was a rough year for notable marquee big-name players getting hurt last year for the NFL, and Johnson was one of them. Now, with the new coach, brings new philosophies, and the Cardinals are going to be changing defensive approaches this year. And in terms of the draft, finally, after all this time, the Cardinals finally went out and got a young quarterback. Now, we know I have my feelings about Josh Rosen, and ultimately only time will tell how this pans out or not. But the Arizona Cardinals had to get a young quarterback. Part of the flaw and ultimate downfall of Bruce Arians in his time in Arizona was the failure to get a young quarterback that could succeed Carson Palmer. It's that simple. And that was a major miss and a major mistake and a really bad decision by this Cardinals organization. Now, they made the move up and they went and got Josh Rosen. It wasn't incredibly prohibitive from a draft pick currency standpoint. They had to go get him. Like, if they felt like he could fit what they wanted, then they had to do the move to move up from 15 to 10 to go get him. And they did. To their credit, they did. Again, whether he's the right guy or not remains to be seen. At least in round 2, they followed that up by taking Christian Kirk from Texas A&M. I really liked him coming out of college. And look at him as a guy that, worst case scenario, can do some damage in the slot, may be able to play some outside, but gives you potentially something else in that passing game. And Lord knows the Cardinals need it. What's interesting to me about this Cardinals team, though, is you look at it, they're not a bunch of jabronis. They've got stars, like legit stars, and yet still feel like they really don't matter that much. That's what's weird about them. Like, David Johnson is a stud. He's a stud. Flat out stud. He is one of the best all-purpose 3-down backs in the National Football League, and I don't think anybody will argue or belabor that point against it. He is what he is. He is a star. So they've got a star running back, a future Hall of Famer at wide receiver in Larry Fitzgerald. And while he's not the most explosive player anymore and the most dominant anymore, he's a leader. He's a consistent presence. He's a great worker. He's a great teammate. He is so many things. He is the Arizona Cardinals franchise at this point in time, and still happens to be, even in his mid-30s, a productive player out of the slot. So you can still call Larry Fitzgerald a star, and he absolutely is. Then you go to the defense. Chandler Jones had 17.5 sacks last year. 17.5. I mean, that's nuts. That's a massive season. Talk about the Cardinals gave up a second-round pick to get him. That was a great move. It really worked out well for them from what Chandler Jones has produced for them. And then you've got Patrick Peterson at corner, one of the best corners in the National Football League. So you got 4 guys at their position that are probably top 3 to 5 at what they do in the league. David Johnson's a top 3 to 5 back. Larry Fitzgerald's a top 3 to 5 slot receiver. Chandler Jones is a top 3 to 5 edge rusher. Patrick Peterson is a top 3 to 5 corner. And you look at that, how many teams would kill for that? How many teams would die for that? How many teams search for that level of star power, that level of potential impact players in different places? I mean, like, if you're an NFL team, you feel like in order to be usually a real Super Bowl contender, potentially a Super Bowl champion, you got to have at least 3, if not 5, true difference makers, true stars. Could be a combination of offense, defense, a variety of different positions. But you look at the Cardinals, they've got 4 of them. But they don't have the one that matters, and that is the quarterback. Now, when I look at this team, even with those stars, I look at the talent that's around them, and it concerns me. What about the receivers other than Larry Fitzgerald? How quickly is Christian Kirk going to be able to acclimate himself to the speed and demands of an NFL offense? I look defensively. What's their pass rush look like outside of Chandler Jones? Can Robert Nkemdiche ever do anything in terms of as an interior edge rusher? Is Hassan Reddick, last year's first-round pick, going to be able to bring them something outside as a blitzer? You just look like secondary around Patrick Peterson. How are they going to look? And then when you throw in the concerns about the quarterback group, I'm sorry, but I don't see a tremendous reason for optimism about this season in and of itself when you're hitching your wagon to Sam Bradford and potentially Josh Rosen. And let's be real, if Josh Rosen looked that good in the preseason and looked that good in the offseason, he would be starting, not Sam Bradford, regardless of the contract. Or you could say that the head coach is that much of a fool already and he'll be doomed to fail, and that could be the case. But I look at this team and it's like they've got some star players. There are reasons to actually, if the Cardinals are on, there's a reason to actually watch them. If for no other reason than to appreciate Larry Fitzgerald and his greatness for the remainder of whatever is left of his career, but also to see David Johnson and Patrick Peterson and Chandler Jones. So to me, they're a bad team with some studs and a reason to watch. But that's all they are. I don't expect a lot out of them this year, and maybe they could surprise us. And they very well might. Especially when you look at the NFC West. Like, a lot of people are really high on the San Francisco 49ers. I'm not so much. The Seahawks have clearly taken a step back. How much of a step back will remain to be seen, because at least they have an elite quarterback in Russell Wilson, and Russell Wilson is a top 5 guy. He is elite. The Cardinals don't have that, but they've got some good pieces in some other places. So it wouldn't be that crazy to think outside of the box and say, hey, the Cardinals might not be as bad as we might envision. They might finish second in that division, and that's possible. But I just don't see it happening. I think this is a 5 or 6 win team, and they're bringing up the rear in the NFC West.